My name is Rochelle Davis, and I am an associate professor of anthropology in the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. And we are all super thrilled today to have Khalid Albaih here with us. Khalid is a Romanian-born, Qatar-raised, but Sudanese award-winning artist, political cartoonist, and cultural producer. And he's based between Doha and Copenhagen. In addition to his two books, one of which is titled KHARTOON and the other Sudan Retold, Khalid publishes his political cartoons and political commentary on current affairs in various media outlets and publications. Khalid is also the founder of the award-winning space sharing platform getfada.com and Sudan Art and Design. And Khalid also, he serves on a number of different boards and consults for several global art and media initiatives. So please join in welcoming Khalid Albaih to talk about his work as an artist, designer, and all the other things that he does. So please, Khalid.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very sorry about the situation here. You know, kids. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. You know, my name is Khalid Albaih. I'm a Sudanese political cartoonist. Now I live here in Copenhagen for a residency for artists and writers at risk. I've been here now for 2 years.
Yeah, so Khalid, can you tell us about just tell us about your background and how you got started thinking about being a political cartoonist? Because I think for me, in reviewing your work, that is really where you've been doing that for many years now. And so how did you get started being a political cartoonist?
Actually, you know, I was always into comics. I loved comics growing up. I read a lot of translated comics, a lot of DC and Marvel translated into Arabic, and they were normally translated in either Egypt or Lebanon or sometimes even Iraq. You know, the Iraqi one is really funny because Superman has a mustache. And of course, you know, they all have Arabic names. You know, Clark Kent is Nabil Fawzi. Bruce Wayne is Subhi something, I can't remember. So I always loved comics, and I was drawing all the time. And I remember when I was like probably 16 or 15, something like that, my father started buying these political cartoon-based magazines, Egyptian ones. One is called Sabah al Khair, which means good morning. The other one is called Rochelle Yusuf, which is the name of the founder. And I remember at that time, I just, you know, it was really interesting to me to see that kind of art, you know, because at the time I've been out of Sudan for maybe like, I don't know, 5 years. And I was just, everything around my life was about politics. You know, my father leaving his job, we have to leave Sudan. Of course, I had an uncle who was a president at some point. And his name is Abdurrahman Sur al-Dahab, and he's actually the only president in the region that stepped down from power, and he's considered a legend until today, actually, just for doing his job. He died last year, and he was an Islamist. I had another uncle, also in the family, who was the head of the Communist Party at some point, Babikr al-Nur, and he was actually executed for a coup in the late 70s. So, you know, I grew up around all of these, you know, political terms, which I really didn't know what it meant. But what it came down to is that I had to leave. You know, my father had to leave. And a lot of people in Sudan had to leave after 1989 when al-Bashir came to power, because of these terms, you know. And when Bashir came to power, who was obviously an Islamist, they had a setup in mind, and anyone that doesn't belong into the party or hadn't been in the party or doesn't approve had to leave or has to deal with it. You know, a lot of people went to jail and so on. So, you know, growing up around all these terms and growing up with hearing about people being tortured for what they believe in and what they stand for, these political cartoons really resonated with me because they were coming out of Egypt. But even though they were coming out of Egypt, they were critical. of the situation, but not in a direct way, And I thought that was, and this is really how you talk about politics, in the region. Anyways, you always whisper, you're always like, you hear about what happened. Like you can't really talk about anything. So cartoons were the only way I think that people could discuss any sort of political matter in a way that people listen and it was acceptable, right? Because most, it's most journalists, the writing, you can't write really, but with the drawing, you can imply for other things and everything. And of course, a lot of it was used as propaganda as well, of course, for Mubarak or for whoever, rules. And because, also one thing I saw with my father is that he always laughed at the news. Even though it wasn't funny, but he always laughed at the news because the first page of any newspaper would be like, the great leader did this and that, and everything is great. We're all happy, And then you turn everybody just turned to the last page and looked at the cartoon because that was probably the most honest thing in the newspaper. So I didn't give it much thought, but then I went on and I studied architecture and interior architecture and I just went into design and stuff, and I worked in museums after that. And the situation in around 2008, 2007, this is I think when I really started kind of putting my work online, and because the internet was kind of the only way that we can share our work in a way that we're not watched, or we don't have to belong to a certain party, or it was a whole other world. Now the internet is part of that divide. Before it was kind of the way out. So I started with early, social media, and even before social media, like blogging, and then, of course, with early versions of Facebook and so on. And I just started doing work and posting my work on there. And I've met a lot of people that were doing similar stuff. And this is at the time the region was boiling. Everyone was really tired of the status quo and what was happening, or what wasn't happening. And a big part of that as well was the we didn't know art. We had no access to art. We had no galleries. We had no art education and so on. So we basically, this was the easiest way to have art that speaks to society, to speaks to the world, really, to our world. So yeah, that was how it started, basically.
Great, thank you. And
Yeah.
One kind of follow-up question that I have just based on looking at your work and thinking about it, and this is sort of a two-pronged question, but I think of the work of amazing sort of political cartoonists from the Arab world, people like Najil Ali, for example, the Palestinian cartoonist who I think was also publishing out of Kuwait as well, or Ali Farzat out of Syria, or now currently Ahmad Hajjaj, Abu Mahjoub out of Jordan, who's based in Jordan. And those people have all been targeted, some arrested, some beaten up, some assassinated, one at least assassinated. Can you talk about sort of their influence on you, or because you mentioned some of the other things, but sort of that real kind of, and you talked about the political cartoonist that you would turn to at the back of the page, and then in kind of also answering that, I eventually want to ask you about how do you do a political cartoon? Like, how do you think of it conceptually? Because I think that there's a magic there that is magical, but if you could at least walk us through it, because these people are just, and you are just amazing in what you can capture.
Being compared to the greats is quite an honor, of course. Actually, my a lot of my style now and was very connected to Najil Ali. and that's mostly because when going through I think Sabah al Khair, it was his anniversary, the anniversary of his assassination. And when I saw the cartoons, the kind of cartoons that he does, it wasn't funny. And for me, that really, like a light bulb came on, that this is I don't have to be funny. It's not all about the joke, it's about the situation. So the cartoon is a piece of art in that way, that it could be only about the situation. So this was my introduction to cartooning. I think to serious cartooning and into black and white and into issues that might be darker than the usual way you think about a caricature or you think about a cartoon. So Ali Farzad is the same thing, but I got introduced to Ali Farzad during the revolution, during the Arab Spring. But with Naji, I think I was really copying what he does, and how he reacted to situation and how he reacted to to political events that happen. So I think I copied a lot of Naji. I think I still do, kind of, and Imad is definitely, like, he's a modern master. I think is one of the best cartoonists that we have right now, and definitely the bravest, most creative. Imad works in a way that is he's super fast, first of all, and he kind of combined both. He does social commentary, which is very funny, and very socially engaged with the local Jordanian society, but also does very internationally kind of style, that could be understood. It could be in the New York Times or it could be in the New Yorker, and this is also one thing that I've tried to copy as well in my work from Imad. That he's very local, but he's very international as well. It depends what is he talking about and how is he talking about it. So he chooses what to say and how to say it depending on the situation. Even though nothing is local anymore, but of course, because of the language and so on, he uses like the local joke, for example. What was the other question?
So, and maybe if you can, I don't know if you're able to, but if you could show us some of your work, as well as sort of like walk us through the thought process that I use the word magic of how you create a political cartoon. I mean, like, just because I look at some of your stuff and I'm like, where did you come up with this idea? This is so smart.
I read a lot. I mean, it's really from, as a child, I'm dyslexic. So as a child, I had to draw biology and I had to draw chemistry for me to understand it. Because back in school, nobody knew what dyslexic was. Everybody just thought I was slow. I thought I was slow, and I thought this is the only way that I could understand things. So this kind of triggered something that for me to visualize whatever I read. So when I read an article, this is what I see in my head. So it's kind of like visual storytelling. In a way, but very compressed. Like this is what I need to say in one frame. And I think what I try to do mostly is, because I work on the internet, and at the end of the day, I'm a social media artist. I don't work anywhere. I don't work for anyone, and all my work is free online under Creative Commons license. So I try to do something for the millennials. I try to do something for the age of the internet, that we are all under the mercy of this. I have like 3 seconds for me to tell you what I want to talk about. So I try to do an artwork or an illustration that you would grab in those 3 seconds. It's kind of like the beginning of a YouTube ad. If it doesn't get you by the 3rd second, you're just like, you just go to the video that you want to go to. And this is exactly what we have to go through now as creatives and as independent artists. because this is my own voice. I don't work for anyone. So it's basically this is my style, and this is what I try to push um, to for me to work. It's very simple, very I use as less colors as I can, and if I use colors, probably just primary colors, and I try not to use language as well, because for me language is one of the borders, one of the walls that we have up between the world, so between countries, because it's at the end of the day, what I want and what someone in China and what someone in Wisconsin wants is the same thing. We all just want our human rights, our freedom of thought, our knowledge and healthcare. So I don't think we're much different, but the narrative makes it much different. So what I think social media at the beginning brought to the table was that it broke those walls. Of course, if you speak English, then you're kind of in communication with a lot of people. And this is what I tried to do. So ever since we actually started on the internet, I remember um, growing up, we were into like chat rooms and stuff like that. And as kids, and because we couldn't leave. We rarely have visas to go anywhere. You know, we no visitors ever comes to Sudan or whatever. So it was our way to see the world, right? So this is what I do my work for. It's the mentality of the internet. How do I grab their attention in that in those 3 seconds, which sometimes is a gateway for me to get your attention to tell you a bigger story, maybe. So this is how I try to do it.
What an interesting response. Thank you. I want to also turn it over to people to ask questions. And I see Ankushi has typed a question. Ankushi, do you want to ask your question, or do you just want me to read it? If you want to ask it, why don't you unmute yourself and talk? And if I don't hear you talking in a few seconds, I'll ask your question for you. Okay, Ankushi has not unmuted herself. So she's typed a question and she says, I think you can see it, Khalid, but I'll read it in case there are people on the phone. In light of what is unfolding in France right now and your residency in Denmark, do you find there are different cultures of satire that you're navigating, and how do you situate yourself there?
So what's happening in France has been happening for a while now, and for the Charlie Hebdo, and before that, of course, with the cartoonists here in Denmark, even. We do. When I say we, I mean cartoonists in where we come from, like in the global South as a whole, or living under authoritarian regimes, or living under censorship or at least obvious censorship. We come from a different world. We do cartoons in a different way. I never worked for a newspaper, but I'm scared of the same things. What is going to censor me, but what's going to happen to me is that it's going to be worse than censoring. Right. So so the way that satire is done in the West is of course under freedom of press, and people can do whatever they want to a certain degree. It's totally different. So when I'm trying to do a cartoon, I am trying to kind of reach out to tell a story about this is what's happening to us right now. This is how we can deal with it, or just telling the situation maybe. But I am well aware of the culture that I am talking to, or at least I try to be well aware of the culture that I'm talking to, and what will be the repercussions of my cartoon, and if it's only a danger to me or a danger to other people. So this is my issue with Charlie Hebdo or with the other cartoonists, is that they just believe that this is something that's I have the right to do, and I will do, because then I am kind of challenging the terrorists, right? However, the terrorists are not really challenged by this act. They're already upset. They don't need that. And with this, you're actually losing the support maybe of this 1 point, I don't know, billion that actually agree with you and actually are the biggest victims of terrorism at the end of the day. So this is the kind of point that I'm trying to get across. Do they have the right to do that? Of course, they have the right to do that. But I risk my life for the last 10 years doing things that I think are for the good of people, not just to prove that I can do that. Because of course you can do that. You're French. You come from a colonial country, and just like pointing at saying it's basically like punching down. I think there's way better ways and styles of addressing the situation, whatever it is, than punching down. How do I deal with that satire? I think I do things like this. I talk, and I talk to other cartoonists as well, because it's you need to know what you're trying to do. What are you trying to say? But I mean, I'm speaking from a point of view of an independent cartoonist. I don't work for a newspaper. Some of these guys have to do something in a day, right? And that's their deadline, right? You have to do something about this in a day, and sometimes you don't know about it. Like, if someone tells me I have to do a cartoon about politics in Indonesia, I don't know what's going on in Indonesia. So I'm probably gonna look up, the stereotypes of things, and I'm gonna do something. It might be offensive. I don't know. Who's gonna read it from Indonesia? My editor is happy. Okay, So it's kind of like that, I feel, but putting the efforts, I think, is something that's is needed now, very much, because the world is smaller than a village right now. Maybe we became a little bit bigger now after this algorithms and the divide of that caused by social media, but it's still there's nothing local anymore. So I think it's really up to the cartoonists to decide what they want to do.
Great, thank you. And I wanted you have this book that has come out called Sudan Retold.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that and sort of what you're retelling and how, just because I don't think many people will have seen it.
Yes. So I always had the idea of writing something about Sudan. One, because I always had to explain where Sudan is, even though it was the biggest country in Africa. And two, I had to explain to myself where Sudan is, because I had to learn about Sudan from my family, from my history, and so on. Because we don't have media, we don't have representative media, we don't have things that represent us and tell us what our history is and who we are, or is told in a very propagandish way for whoever is ruling the country. So it's Sudan. We grew up in an age where Sudan was always told, we were always told that we were Arab and we were Muslim. Even though we don't look Arab, and most of not most of us, but a lot of us are not Muslim. So it really caused a confusion that I think continued until today. And in Sudan, one of our biggest issues in Sudan is the identity crisis. We don't know who we are because we didn't study our history, because we were told about certain highlights in our 6,000 years or even more history, and we're told this is it, this is you. We built more pyramids than anybody in the world, and we did the Mahdi revolution, and now we're Islamists and we're fighting the global regime. So what I try to do is I try to write something, and then I feel like, okay, so now I'm making the same mistake because I'm writing my point of view again. So I was like, okay, why don't I ask other artists, other graphic artists to do that? But then I said, okay, why don't I ask all creators to do that? Whether you're in photography or film or painting or cook. And this is exactly what happened. I partnered up with the Goethe Institute and a friend of mine called Larissa Harmon, and we worked together on a workshop to basically give artists a chance to talk about their history, whatever they want to talk about, whether it's their tribal history, whether it's whatever they want to talk about, and see how they can bring that to now, to the future, how they want to tell it, how they want to tell their story. Is it through art? Is it through photos? Is it through a recipe? How do they want to talk about this? And the results were amazing, actually. And but again, it was very sad sometimes because people see my name and they're like, oh, we don't want to do anything politics. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not about politics. It's about your history. What do you want to do? And incredible stories came out of that book about the past, about now, and about the future. And we're working on volume 2 right now as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Dina wants to ask a question. She has typed it, but she also has said she will unmute herself and ask the question. So please go ahead, Dina.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Khalid, and thank you all the organizers of the event. So, Khalid, I read your op-ed piece on the issue of racism in Sudan. How do you address racism through your art? And how is it received by your Sudanese or Arab audiences, given that, especially since the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, Arab communities have not been very welcoming to addressing this issue transparently, or at least the way I see it in Jordan. So I'd love to hear your view on that. Thank you.
I try to talk about this because I navigate in different societies, right? So mostly I'm in the West. I'm talking about migrant workers. I'm talking about immigrants. I'm talking about refugees. In Sudan, I'm normally talking about as well. There's differences. The religion. The authoritarian regime and so on. After the Black Lives Matter, and we had the longest running war in Africa, and it was mainly because of we're Arab and they're not, basically, so it was racism is something that you grow up with in Sudan. Is the first question someone will ask you is like, which tribe do you belong to, and according to your tribe they will give you respect. So we grow up about that being normalized. It was very normal. So when I traveled, when I went to Doha, when I went to Saudi, when I went to the Emirates, when I went to Egypt, I saw how people treat me because of my color, and people had no idea who I am. Like I know everything. We in Sudan know the history of Egypt. We know the history of Jordan. We know the history of Algeria. And so these people are, they'll wear red. There's a disputed stay that says مصر تكتب, Egypt writes, Baghdad Beirut تطبع, and Sudan يقرأ. Beirut prints and Sudan reads, and sometimes it's Iraq reads. So it's but nobody knows anything about it, and it's mainly because of that. Like we're the black people that live under Egypt. We're like Ahmed Zaki and Mohammed Munir, and that's when it's good, right? But I grew up hearing abd, all of these, like slave and all of these words casually, whether it's from Sudanese describing other Sudanese people or whether it's from Arabs describing black people, right? And it's like hanging out with like white people saying nigger, and you're like, and you're black. I'm like, hey man, I'm here as well. So it's this is the most important thing I think that happened that provided me with that insight, is that I was part of the other cultures. I saw how they look at us, and I saw how Sudanese people look at other Sudanese because of that. So do Arabs know they're racist? I think they know they're racist. They absolutely know it. Do Sudanese know they're racist? They absolutely know it. Do they think it's normal? Yes, they think that's it. That's how it is. But when they leave, they're not able to live with that. It's exactly what happens when Arabs go to America. It's the same thing.
Great. Thank you, Khalid. I think we have a question from Professor Laura Smith. Laura, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you so much, Khalid. I also have had my camera off because I'm monitoring some pre-adolescent boys here with schooling. So I really appreciate your joining us and sharing these insights in the midst of all of the things we're all balancing. I also really appreciated the way that you talked about political satire. So, I'm a political scientist, and I do try to integrate those in my teaching a bit. And I really appreciated the way that you talked about political cartoons in particular as a way to reach different audiences. So across languages, which is of course a huge barrier for those of us who study, particularly Africa. The diversity can also be a barrier. So I really appreciated that, but also your experience of having a learning challenge with dyslexia and how that helped you to learn, but then is also, something that could reach others across that. So I wondered, sort of expanding on that, do you see political cartoons as also being able to reach other communities in other parts of the world? So as an Africanist, I'm thinking of, rural communities, those outside of the largest media access. Is that also where your work has been able to reach, or is that sort of a new frontier or an impossibility?
Because I work mainly online, I don't kind of reach to the public. I'm very into the millennial circle, and mostly like middle class, upper class, stuff like that. I try to do other projects to reach that population, but if cartoons can reach, yes, absolutely. I mean, cartoons are the easiest way to communicate anything. If you see, any flyer like talking about any, AIDS or prevention of AIDS, is always very simple drawings. Going back to like the pharaohs, like the way that they drew them. This is the simplest way that you can address any issue. I'm sorry. What was the rest of the question?
No, that's it. I mean, sort of the future of it. And I think, right, I mean, more and more rural people also have access to technology. So I didn't know if you've gotten any of that feedback, but I mean, I hear you that there are different kinds of audiences.
I think cartoons now, you could tell the power of cartoons now, even in places like America in the elections. Right, so you could see like the Pepe the Frog, for example, right? Who's the artist had no idea that this is gonna go this way, or the memes, which is also some sort of political cartooning as well. So it's the satire is the way that you inject the information, the propaganda, in a very simple way, so and it's for the masses at the end of the day, and it's that's why I love doing cartoons, because I can talk to a professor and I can talk to an 8-year-old, and when I say I'm a cartoonist, everybody smiles, right? Before they see my work, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Khalid, can you talk about cartooning COVID? Because you've been doing that since it really started, and it's a hard one to kind of think about how you do a sort of cartoon, even if it's a political cartoon about it. And so can you kind of address how you think about that and how the reception has been to that as well?
I mean, I treated COVID just like I treat any other political event. For me, the way I look at things is that I'm rewriting, I'm writing history from my point of view through these cartoons. So I was drawing at the beginning about how it feels right now, or how what should we be looking at, and what I try to do is try to do something different. I don't want to say that this is the world is over and so on, right? I mean, I think that the secret to to a good cartoonist to try to say something meaningful, not to do a cartoon for the sake of a cartoon. And that's always the issue when there's a crisis, right? So after any crisis, like whether it's like a terrorist attack, 9/11, for example. If you look at all the cartoons after 9/11, it was all like an eagle crying or Uncle Sam like pushing up his sleeves, or very very cartoony, and it doesn't have much substance, and it's all about revenge or whatever. Sometimes you have to do that because that's the spirit of the moment, or maybe this is how you feel, but it doesn't really say anything. So what I try to do, what I've learned, like after I think now a decade of doing this, and basically kind of burning out, really, because it's the continuous fight. It's really trying to do things with substance, and it's about quality, not quantity, and try to deliver a message, right? And which is always what I try to do. But with COVID now, I'm trying to see what's really important, not to be part of the noise. I think that's very important, not to be part of the noise.
Sarah Abdurrahman has a question for you, which she will say, but it's also typed in the chat. So please, Sarah, if you would unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Saida Khalid. Nice to meet you. I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts with us about the recent developments in Sudan, being delisted from the state sponsors of terrorism, and what role you think art and and cartoons have in helping us digest this politically tense moment in Sudan, when there is a lack of transparency from official sources about a lot of the details. But again, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I think the lifting from the list was used against us, against the Sudanese people. It was used as a reason for us to be part of another big event in the region, which most people see it as the biggest event in the region, which is the normalization with Israel, right? That's going on right now, which basically Trump and Netanyahu and the United Arab Emirates just want to get it out of the way, as soon as possible. Just stack up names, and it's kind of like what they're doing right now is very much like the coalition of the willing, with Bush. It's like the U.S., the U.K., and Thailand, and an island in the Pacific. These are the armies that are fighting for Iraq's freedom. So this is kind of the same thing. It's just like pushing up as many names as possible, and Sudan was the easiest way, and the delisting, even though we had a revolution that was led by women, artists, civil society, it was a revolution that the whole world spoke about. We have photographs that came out of the sit-in. The sit-in was amazing in terms of art and freedom of expression and so on, the music, everything. And we demanded democracy, and we're still demanding the civilian rule. But all of that didn't count. We were all sitting there saying, why are we still in the terrorist list? And why are we paying money for something that, the dictators that did the same thing to us? Why are we paying money for that? So it was kind of like they got us surrounded. It's like you either do this, and this was frankly said by Pompeo, and it was pushed by the Israelis and everything. Like a few days before they did the signing with Trump, I was reading a few Israeli news outlets, and everyone was saying, "Oh, Sudan is next. Sudan is next." Obviously because we don't have a choice. So it's nothing. For me, it's the point right now is not how I feel personally about Israel as an apartheid state or whatever, or it's not about the Islamist way of looking at Israel. It's not about that. It's about not having a choice and connecting our livelihood, a country's livelihood, a country that fought for its freedom for 30 years, into a decision that has nothing to do with that at all, and that the people didn't even make that decision. So it was basically bullying. It's like you either join or we're just gonna let you die, right? And it came with influences. It came with all sort of things. So I don't think the civilian government could have been more transparent. They basically said like, listen, we don't have a choice. Like this is what we're doing. But what they did was that they fought for at least a tweet from Trump, right? This is the lifeline for a country that fought for democracy, that is dying right now because of economical sanctions that we don't deserve. A tweet from Trump that he is selling for us because we have to make him win this election. We have to be a name. We have to be a badge on his, on his armor. Right? He doesn't care. He does. I don't believe he even knows who we are or what has happened. He has no idea. This is just what has to happen. It doesn't matter. Democracy, all of that doesn't matter. Nothing at all. So it's. I think what our government did, what Hamadov did, our prime minister did, and um, Abdel Nasser Bari, Abdel Bari, the minister of the minister of justice and the team was that just to have okay that this that we're going to get off that list first. Let's just make sure that we get off that list first. And I think that was a very smart decision because they gambled everything. Because I think at the beginning they wanted to wait to see what's going to happen after the election. But Sudan can't survive. Sudan cannot survive, and we will fall back into another authoritarian regime. The army's waiting, and basically other deposed dictators are just waiting in line. We have Hamiti from the rapid defense forces, whatever it's called, the Janjaweed. They're all just waiting, and they're supported to come and say that upfront.
Thank you, and a great question, Sara. As painful as it all is, but thank you for that analysis, Khalid. Maddie has a question that she is asking. She's posting as CCA asked. Maddie, do you want to ask this, please? That would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I was just curious, Khalid, also if you could speak to your relationship as an artist, as someone in the Sudanese diaspora, and kind of the relationship between Sudanese people living outside of Sudan as well as inside of Sudan, and maybe how your relationship with your audience is different in the international community and the reception of your work for people who are currently living in Sudan.
It's very complicated. I mean, a lot of times I feel like can I talk about issues in Sudan? Can I talk about things like that? I'm outside of Sudan, and especially during the revolution. Can I ask people to go out in the street while I'm not out in the street? It's a heavy thing to ask, So and the same thing is because I was living in Qatar. So living in Qatar, of course, comes with a whole package. Like, you're supported by Al Jazeera, or you support the Muslim Brotherhood, or all of these things. So it's and it's always a question about my integrity, right? Which I really try to preserve. Like I'm really trying to be independent, even though that means I'm broke most of the time. But this is what it means to me. This is how important my work as a cartoonist is that I need to be independent because it became so obvious now. You work for Al Jazeera, you do this. You work for Al Arabiya, you do this. You work for the New Times, you do this. You work for the so having an independent voice, and this is one of the biggest things that happened during the Arab Spring was the emergence of the citizen journalists, right? And that died off. It's not there anymore, right? So I try to be that. I try to talk from a point of view of perspective from someone who is outside. I'm not claiming that I am inside. I'm not claiming that I know what's going on, but I try to talk about things that I know about, and I can express in a way that is general, but kind of asking a question. And that's what art is about, asking questions.
I think I've asked for last questions, and I don't have any from anyone else. So I'm going to take the opportunity to ask you a question, a final question, Khalid. What's next? What are you working on, and what can we look forward to? And what are you thinking about? And yeah, talk to us about it.
So I was talking to a friend of mine, and it turns out that I'm working on 13 projects. I'm working on, one of the most exciting things that I'm working on right now is a revamping of a TV channel. It's called Sudan Bukra, which is actually the only independent television channel in Sudan. It's a young activist basically that made a channel, and now we're all working to make it into a proper channel. I'm trying to work on Sudan Retold Volume 2. Of course, I'm trying to get Fada off the ground. I'm very sorry. So because Get Fada for me is giving people a chance that I didn't have before, or I did have, and that's why I'm here with you right now. Get Fada kind of gives people an alternative in terms of going through galleries and going through museums. You donate, individuals and organizations can donate their spaces and their facilities to artists and to their community. So what I'm trying to do is trying to kind of carve another alternative way for artists to work and explore, for you to explore their work. And that came from feeling that the internet that we had, the internet that we fought in, the internet that gave us that access to freedom is absolutely gone now. All we have now is basically advertisement channels, data mining, machines, that don't give us that access anymore. So it's really sad that the only access for freedom that we have right now is used against us. I think right now we're back at the age of the newspaper where my dad used to laugh at the first page. We're right back at that again. So I think we really need to figure out an alternative way to share news and real news and to know what real news is actually. And the other thing that I'm working on is I'm starting a library in Khartoum with a great team. We're trying to work together to start a public library. I've donated 400 of my books, my graphic novels, to Goethe Institute Library in Khartoum. And as far as I know, that's the first graphic novels library or space in maybe East Africa or even the region as a whole. So what I'm trying to do right now is trying to do a traveling library in Sudan that we can go, and that traveling library will have programming, we'll have talks, we'll have a cinema, and we're trying to get funding, we're trying to get all these things, because I think what we need most in Sudan right now is to keep our freedom of speech, to understand the importance of that, and to find ways to making sure that they can never shut us up again.
Great, thank you, Khalid. I think we need to wrap up, but Jeff Ghannam has one question. Jeff, do you want to ask it?
Yeah, thank you, Rochelle. And Khalid, thank you so much for being with us today. I missed the first part of your talk, but, as we see in the Arab world and beyond, lots of political satire, and some of it is through comedians as well as political cartoonists. I'm wondering if you could just address what are the circumstances that would allow that margin of freedom of expression for political satire? Do you experience it in the Arab world through your work? And, perhaps when it's politically convenient for the regime to allow it, it's allowed. And when it's not, it's not. But is it a little bit more nuanced than that? Thank you.
That's why I'm not in the Arab world right now.
Right.
Because, it's when it's convenient, but you never know. Like sometimes I used to, publish something, and I'm just looking over my shoulder. I'm like, what happened now? So it's always, you never know whether you're whatever you are. You really don't know. So it's not more nuanced than that. No, I think it's really that, and it's not only journalism or cartoonists or artists' problem. I think it's everybody's problem, and that's why you know your voice don't count, and that's why most of these young men are dying crossing the Mediterranean trying to be heard. Just to be heard. Just not to be a number. And this also ties back to this whole thing with normalizing with Israel. Which I find really funny because there's thousands of Sudanese refugees in Israel, which they want to get rid of. They don't like. There's riots. They're trying to keep them out of their houses. Nobody's. They're trying to there's paying countries to take Sudanese refugees. But now we're very important. Now they want us in. It's all into Sudan's going to normalize the relationship. You have a lot of Sudanese in Israel. Why don't you treat them the way that like you want normalization with them first, right? So we're not counted as people. That's the issue. We're not counted. We're looked at as numbers. And you can even see that in all news about the region. It's like 200 people died in Iraq in a bomb. 200 people, right? After like a month, when they say 200 people, we're like, it's not that bad, right? Like it's the same thing. I don't know, like how many people died in a boat in the Middle East, like trying to in the Mediterranean. We're just numbers. It doesn't matter anymore, And I think this is why it's very important what's happening in Sudan right now, what's happening in Nigeria right now. That's very important because these are all young populations that are fed up, and this is always what happens. What happened in the Arab Spring is that these populations rose, but now the authoritarian regimes are back and worse than ever. Now Sisi is like Mubarak on steroids. Look at what's happening in the region as a whole. You can't talk. And it's like again, it's like it's this hatred or it's this embedded, like they're embedding in news or even in popular culture this hatred for intellectualism. You can't be intellectual. You can't talk about a revolution. You can't talk about change. So yeah, I think it's very simple. If we don't like your voice, you're gone. And this is exactly what happened to Ahmad. Ahmad was in Jordan. Ahmad Haddad was in Jordan when he did that cartoon, but he still went to jail.
Thank you very much.
So it's 1 o'clock, and I think it is time for us to wrap up. Khalid, thank you so much from all of us, from CCAS, from African Studies, and from all
I'm really sorry about this. The noise was just out of my hand. I had to drop the kid off.
No worries.
Yeah.
We were just delighted to have you with us. So thank you so much, and we look forward to reconnecting again. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for the Georgetown Air Center. Thank you so much.